In this lesson, we will be briefly looking at how to draw and composition vector shapes to create characters or props to animate. In front of us, we have a new blank document consisting of one layer and one frame. The shape drawing tools are located in the center of the toolbar. Here you will find rectangles, ovals, stars and polygons, as well as tools to make lines, brush strokes, and freeform shapes. Hover over a tool with your mouse to see what it is and its keyboard shortcut. First, I'm going to select the rectangle tool. This changes the cursor to a crosshair. Notice that the Properties panel displays settings for the active tool. Here we can easily set the fill color as well as the strokes color, thickness, and width variation. Clicking on the color box next to the fill icon reveals the color picker, which has a range of 256 colors to choose from. Or click on the color wheel to mix your own specific color. I will leave the stroke color black and increase the stroke width. Click and drag to create a rectangle. Or hold Shift while dragging to create a perfect square. The same goes for the oval tool. Shapes do not always need strokes and can be drawn without. Simply set the stroke color to nothing. You will quickly notice that shapes in Animate work a little bit different from other software. Let me demonstrate. If I draw two shapes of the same color overlapping each other, their fills will combine to make one big shape. You can see this when I select and move the result with the Select tool. If I draw two overlapping shapes with different fill colors, instead of combining, they will subtract. This is Animate's default drawing mode. All shapes flatten on the current layer. If you prefer keeping overlapping shapes intact, switch on Object Drawing mode in the Properties panel. Then draw a shape. This time when we click on the shape to move it, it now has a box around it. To convert a drawing object back into a regular shape, use the Break Apart function and you will see it flatten down. We need some space. To select all the drawings on the layer, click on Frame 1. That selects everything we see on the stage. Next, tap Delete or Backspace on your keyboard. I'm selecting the Line tool first. If you take a look at the Properties panel, you will see that the fill option is not available. I'll select the stroke color and turn off Object Drawing mode. Just like before, click and drag to make a straight line. Alternatively, to make freeform lines, use the Paintbrush tool and click and drag. Like shapes, lines join together too. This is pretty handy if you want to turn line drawings into custom shapes. To do that, use the Paint Bucket tool and fill the empty space, just like using Photoshop. Make sure that lines are completely enclosed or it won't fill. You can also use the Paint Bucket to refill existing shapes with new colors. Similar to the Line tool, we have the Paint tool. It's a very complicated tool to learn, but if you're lucky, you might already know it from Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. This tool is used to create smooth, curvy lines, or custom shapes with flat or curved sides. For a flat-sided shape, single-click once to start, and once for every new corner point. Close the shape by clicking back on the starting point. For a shape with curved sides, also start with a single click, and do the next point with a click and drag action. Release the button once you are happy with the direction and magnitude of the curve. Continue to click and drag or single click to make corners. It takes a lot of effort to become totally comfortable with the pen tool. Don't expect to master it in a day. Unlike the other shape tools, a shape drawn with the pen tool reveals its path and anchor points. To neatly edit those, I'll use the Sub-Select tool. This tool can reveal and edit any line or shape's paths and anchor points. Click drag on a point to move it. Or to adjust the curve, select the point first and carefully pull the handle to adjust the curve. If you're unable to select the point, deselect first by clicking on the stage and try again. Let's go back and have an in-depth look at the Select tool. It does much more than just moving shapes about. I'll clear the stage again and draw out one drawing object and one normal shape. Make sure that you always switch back to the selection tool after drawing a shape. That way you can immediately move or modify whatever you just drew. To demonstrate this tool, I'm going to click on the regular shape. There are two things to notice here. Firstly, there is a dotted mesh almost completely covering the shape. That indicates that the shape, or a portion of it, is selected. And secondly, notice that the Properties panel now displays properties of a shape. From here you can change the full color. The stroke options appear to be grayed out. This simply means that you have the fill selected but not the stroke. In Animate, strokes and fills are not necessarily permanently connected. I'll single click on the stage to deselect. This time I'm double clicking inside the shape and you will notice the dotted mesh appears on both the fill and the stroke, and properties can be modified for both. Selecting part of the shape is actually quite cool. For instance, we can separate a stroke from its fill. If we make a drag selection by clicking and dragging from the outside of a shape, you will notice that only part of it gets selected. Once modified, the part becomes its own shape. I can even move the selected piece away. It really feels like working with clay. This, however, does not work on a drawing object, and only selects the whole thing. Like the subselection tool, the regular selection tool can also modify anchor points and paths. First, make sure that the shape is not selected. You can't do anything but move a selected shape. Pay close attention as I approach the corners. The cursor indicates an anchor point with a right angle icon. I simply click and drag to adjust the corner quite naturally. Next, pay attention to what happens when we approach the sides. A curve icon appears next to the cursor. When I click and drag, a straight side becomes curved and I can continue to adjust it, just like sculpting. Sculpting also works on drawing objects. Drawing in Animate is really easy, but it can be tricky to get used to. I suggest you pause the class and spend some time making drawings and playing with each of the shape tools to get a good feel for it.